I have discovered the best homemade smoothie recipe for a strawberry and banana smoothie. And now I just want to have smoothies every day. I seriously do. It's so good. I really was struggling for a while because strawberry and banana smoothies and mango smoothies are my two favorite kinds, and I was just struggling with how to make it at home. I looked up recipes and they all seemed to do not well. For me, I just felt like it was just too strong on whatever the liquid flavor was. But now I have discovered how to make the perfect one with the perfect ratio of everything, and I just want to drink smoothies all the time. Do any of you guys like smoothies, or do you have any smoothie recipes that are your favorite? I'd love to hear if you guys like smoothies and which kind of ones you prefer. Let's go ahead and get into today's class. Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. Today's class is going to be another set of chapters on Harrow the Ninth. This time we're going to be discussing chapters 29 through 34. So hopefully you have been enjoying the book. We have definitely really made it more into the thick of the plot by now. So we're definitely having some interesting developments, some new things going on. So hopefully you are enjoying that and ready to discuss the next set of chapters with me. Let's go ahead and dive straight in, as always, with our recap. It is kind of a bigger set of chapters, and we did have kind of some important things going on, so I've got quite a few things to go over with our recap. So first we start out where Ianthe is now happy with her arm. She got it encased in gold. She, did the fight with Augustine, and he was really excited about her improvement with this new arm. So she's really come fully into her lectorhood, at least as far as her fighting skills are concerned. And Ianthe then recruits Augustine to help Harrow kill Ortis. So she has now included him in their plans, and he decides that he's going to help them by distracting God enough that she will get a chance to actually fully kill Ortis if she can. He sets up this dinner. Everyone's invited. They get a fancy invitation, all that jazz. It's kind of meant to be this really fancy, nice dinner that all of them on the ship are going to attend and be there for. At the dinner, he works very, very hard to make sure that everyone is getting very, very drunk. He keeps ladling out more alcohol, being very fun, energetic, entertaining, trying to keep at least God there, get him drunk, get him wanting to not leave and just enjoying the gathering. Ortis, of course, leaves early like predicted, and Ianthe and Harrow are just waiting for their moment to escape so that way they can try and kill him, or at least Harrow herself can try and kill him. And they find, once everyone is very, very drunk, and Augustine and Mercy have kind of instigated a sexual moment with God. They're moving into that moment. Ianthe and Harrow skedaddle. And this is Harrow's chance to fully kill Ortis. This was the moment, though it shocked her and she did not realize that was going to be the distraction. She quickly gets over that, goes to find Ortis, and when she does, she ends up finding that Cytherea, who's supposed to be dead, is putting him in the incinerator alive after stabbing him in order to burn him to a little crisp. And Harrow ends up saving Ortis, surprisingly enough. She ends up pulling open the hatch, sounding the alarm, pulling him out, and of course everyone goes running. So she doesn't end up getting to kill him, she ends up saving him, and then everyone thinks that it's her because nobody believes that Cytherea actually came back from the grave or whatever and tried to burn him alive. So this whole incident happens, and then we jump to 2 months before the Emperor is killed. On the top of that chapter, and we are where Harrow is being left alone on a planet in order to kill it, and Mercy will come back for her later. So she's wandering around, she's working on killing this planet like she's been told, when she runs into Camilla, who's been following her on this island. And she finds out that Camilla wanted her to find out if Sextus was still alive in this piece of skull that she's been carrying around, and hopefully he is still attached, his soul is still attached to this piece of bone. She dives in there, finds Sextus, talks to him a little bit, explains the situation, that he's been trapped there for as long as he has been, and the sleeper ends up following her in there and ends up attacking. So she quickly leaves and hopes that Sextus is still alive in that spirit space. And then Camilla also finds out that, then Harrow also finds out that Camilla is with Captain Duertos and Coronabeth. And they have a picture of Gideon on that fourth seat there. So she ends up seeing all of them, recognizes that none of them are dead, and she doesn't recognize the picture of Gideon. So the girls end up going to leave and only leaving behind the notion that they were picked up and helped from the blood of Eden. And then quite some time later, Mercy comes and picks up Gideon from the planet. So that's where we're at right now, is we've just had this whole adventure with meeting Sextus, who's just in spirit form, and her interactions with him, as well as Camilla and the others with her faulty memory. It's pretty interesting, this development. I wasn't sure how we were going to meet Camilla and the others again. I mean, obviously they were taken from the first house. They couldn't find their bodies or couldn't find them in general, but we didn't really know how they were going to play out in this story, if they did at all. And we do see them now, which will be very interesting in the future to see how things progress with that. First things first, let's go ahead and back up a little bit and start with the Lyctors Dynamic. And what I mean by that is kind of like their relationships, how they work together, how they, interact with each other, the differences that we've kind of seen with who they are, what they say, but then how they interact and how they interact with God. So they're kind of dynamic in that sense. Because we really see some interesting developments in the dynamic between different Lyctors, the relationships between them and how they interact with each other. We now see exactly how close God is to his Lyctors. It was something unexpected for me. I don't know if you guys guessed it or not, but that was not where I expected things to be going. With the fact that, Mercy and Augustine and God are kind of all starting to have a threesome. And that was the distraction that Augustine was going to have in order to make it so Harrow could kill Ortis. And it kind of makes sense once you think about it, which is kind of interesting, because I never had suspected that that was going to be the case, that we were going to suddenly understand that that is how close they are. But it kind of makes sense in the fact that they're deep in space, they live forever, and they're a tight-knit group that's been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. So who else are they really gonna have relationships with and have physical relationships with? It's probably going to be unlikely to have many times to have options that are outside of the immediate group. So I guess it makes sense when you think about it that they would then become romantically, or at least physically interacting with each other with sex or with other physical desires that they have. It makes sense that that would be the case. But it's also very interesting because you think of God, yes, as a person, but mostly as a quote-quote God, because, that's who he is to Harrow and to the characters that we are originally familiar with from book 1, is that he is kind of considered this almighty being, and it seems, especially to Harrow, even in this moment, very sacrilegious to be touching and physically intimate with him. and that the Lyctors are very familiar with him. They call him John, they have times where they are very casual with each other, and it makes sense then to know that they've had these physical dynamics, even if it was, at least for me, unexpected. I would love to know if it was expected for you, or if you felt like that was something that was coming, or if that just didn't surprise you, even if you didn't 100% expect it either, but it just wasn't that much of a surprise. I just thought it was super, super interesting, and I was just as shocked as Harrow to be like, oh wait, that's what the kind of distraction this was? But again, it does end up making sense when you think about it as terms of who else were they going to really have sexual relations with, or romantic relations either. And then we even have that the dynamic between Harrow and Ianthe has kind of been shifting this last little bit. Obviously, Harrow is staying in Ianthe's room, and since then their relationship has kind of mellowed. It's becoming a little bit more towards friendship, or a little bit more towards being closer and being able to connect a little bit more with each other. I mean, obviously Harrow made the arm for Ianthe, as well as her making this bargain so that way she could try and kill Ortis. And during this moment, Ianthe always does try to kiss Harrow, though Harrow does not let her do so. But she does lean in, expecting to do that. We don't really know if that was meant to be more of a romantic gesture, if it was just more of a, for Ianthe, like more of a, I'm drunk and I just kind of was turned on by the fact that the other three were doing things or not. It really isn't per se stated or obvious exactly how Ianthe meant that motion to be, but she definitely would not have been doing that at the beginning of this book or in the previous book. She definitely would not have even been close to almost kissing Harrow or trying to kiss Harrow at all before this. And so it's kind of like where you're kept up in this one space and you're forced to interact with these people whether you like them or not, and you can't help but become closer and have a little bit more of an interaction that isn't full of hostility and a little bit more of understanding, since you're all in this cooped up spaceship that's been together with only these people for many, many months at this point. And for the other Lyctors, many, many years they've been with each other. So it does seem like, especially like Mercy Morn and Augustine, that they just totally hate each other. But we can see even in this section where she helps him out and, and that they have, it is clear that they have had sexual relations before this, that this is not something that's new, that they are connected to each other. They might hate each other at this point, but at some point either they didn't, or even now as they're doing it, they still have this connection, this bond that they cannot break, since they are one of the few Lyctors available, and they know each other as well as they do. So we really see, before we were just seeing all the hatred, all the biting back and forth, we just see Ortis as like this kind of, loner person, but really you can tell now that there are these connections that are very, very deeply rooted, and they're not going to be going away anytime soon. They can't even be erased by the hatred that they seem to have for each other. There is still that little kernel of connection, possibly love, maybe not necessarily a really romantic love, but more of just a deep understanding and love for another person because they know them so well. And then it's also very interesting because the fact that they have this connection, but then they really don't care if they kill each other. So it's kind of a hard dynamic to follow, because it's like they have this moments where they have this softness to them, and even though they hate each other, they're willing to, come together in a physical intimacy relationship because of this deal that they made, and they have almost this little bit of softness afterward. But then they both are being complicit in the fact that they're fine with Harrow killing Ortis, and they really don't care about him. So it's very interesting, the fact that they have this softness and this connection, and yet they're willing to just be like, oh yeah, go ahead and kill him, it's fine, I'll help you with that, sure, that sounds like fun. It's super interesting. Of course, Augustine didn't think that she could kill him, but he's still being complicit in letting her try, which you would think with that connection that he wouldn't be willing to do that. And it becomes to wonder if maybe that tie is just so linked to God that then when they're around God and they have that link that kind of ties them together again, that God is making that softness there. And then when they get away from God, then they understand how much they irritate each other. Which, I mean, they have been together for years and thousands of years and such. So I can understand how it would be hard to get along with someone and yet hard to break that connection that you have with someone, that knowledge that you've had that known that person for that long and so deeply. So it's just a very complicated dynamic that when we're just slowly starting to learn how complicated it is. We've got the softness, we've got the okay to kill each other, we've seen, you know, already their arguments and them hating each other, and then we've got that bond that they have, that they've been intimate with each other, and possibly not been intimate with anybody else other than each other for a very, very long time. So we see all these different sides and angles and different things, and so it's very hard to classify what dynamic these Lyctors actually have to each other. And we see that dynamic kind of flowing a little bit onto Harrow and Anth, even they've only been together, you know, 10 months or so. They're already starting to have their relationship changed and it become deeper, even if it's not always 100% friendlier. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is Camilla and her companions that have now been talking to Harrow. So Camilla specifically seeks her out because she is the strongest person and would know for sure if Sextus is attached to that piece of bone that she has managed to salvage from his exploded body. And this appearance has now been completely destroying Harrow's mind over and over again. I mean, obviously she's regenerating, but there's just the nose bleeding, there's just all this, and Camilla has mentioned how her brain is rupturing and would have killed anybody who wasn't a Lyctor immediately, and it's happening over and over again, but her body is just being able to heal enough over and over again that it's not causing her any real problems other than the bleeding nose and the lightheadedness and stuff. But this has definitely taken Harrow out of her bubble, or her safety bubble, in the fact that this completely counters the fake memories that she has had about her time at the first house. Because Camilla is not supposed to be alive. We've got, you know, Captain Duertos, who isn't supposed to be alive. Coronabeth, I don't remember, and I think in her story wasn't, in her arts of my mind, I think she's supposed to have been thrown off that cliff, right? That was Coronabeth. So all of these people are not supposed to be alive. The people that she actually interacted with and had more of a relationship with were the people who died pretty much immediately in the actual history of her life. So whatever she did to her brain that made her forget Gideon and to forget actually the events that happened to her, seeing Camilla and the others is completely, like, destroying her mental capacity. It's just destroying her brain, and luckily she's just a superhuman at this point as being a Lyctor, and it's not actually destroying her enough to kill her. She's just having severe medical problems while she's in Camilla's presence. But it's super interesting that her brain is recognizing that something has gone wrong. It's triggering in her brain, but not triggering enough to remember what's going on. It's just destroying it. So we're gonna find out what happens now that she understands that her memories are fake. We don't really understand why this decision was made or what this is meant to do, so we don't know how it's going to move forward. But that's what it seems that is going on right now, is that it's not triggering anything new, but now she's going to know that Camilla is alive and these others are alive. As well as, you know, Harrow had to give Camilla immediately that letter, which she did. I think it's very amazing that she herself is so trusting in her own self that she has let herself write all these letters from the past, and she does not read any of them. She only reads the ones in the cases that she dictates, please read this letter. She immediately gives Camilla her letter that she's supposed to read, and that's it, you know, and she's never read it. She never looks at them. She looked at the one where if you met Coronabeth, what you're supposed to do, but she hasn't looked at that previously. She just reads them when she is dictated to do so. So we don't totally know what Camilla's letter said. We don't understand, other than possibly my guess would be that it would tell Camilla, like, hey, I don't remember you. This is the situation or whatever. but I will grant you whatever it is that you wished, or something like that. Like, I think what she actually told Harrow was true about what it said, that she was going to grant her her request, but I think it also probably said more about explaining things. And I'm really surprised that Harrow did not actually ask to physically see the letter and know what was written there. She just trusted that Camilla told her the truth about what was written, which also surprised me that she would not demand a little bit more proof about what exactly went on with that letter. I do think it's pretty interesting that Gideon, her picture is taped to that chair as a fourth person. I'm not really sure why Gideon is taped to that chair, or her picture. We know that she died, obviously, because that's the reason that Harrow became a Lyctor. We know that her body was taken, like with Camilla, and that they couldn't find the body. But they don't have the body with them, they just taped a picture of her to that seat. So what does that mean and why? That's what I'm curious about, is why exactly do they want the memory of Gideon there? Was that specifically for Harrow? Is this, a little bit more of a long game that Camilla and the others are a little bit of a part of, and they chose this particular time to show up? It's very interesting because they mentioned that they've been following her, but it's like, how have they been following her? How did they find her in such deep space? How long have they been there? There's so many questions that now we already had so many questions from before, like what's going on? Why is Harrow like this? Why did she erase her memories or do whatever happened to her? Because obviously it seems like it was done intentionally. What is the point? All this stuff. And then we come and Camilla comes in and it's like everything's kind of blowing up even more. Like, okay, well, now what's going on with them? Is this in connection to what Harrow's already done? It's just kind of completely more and more and more questions. And for me, especially, I just can't get over the fact that they taped Gideon's picture to that chair. What could be the reason that they did that? I would love to hear if you have any thoughts or any guesses about why Gideon is taped to that chair, like her picture. Because to me, it doesn't seem like, if this person is dead, what is the point of having the picture there? Because none of them were really that close to Gideon. Maybe Camilla. I could see that maybe Camilla would do that because Camilla was the closest to Harrow and Gideon by the time that things ended, and Gideon did sacrifice her life in order for Harrow and Camilla to live. But it just seems like that would be more of a personal picture that Camilla would then have with her instead of it being taped to a chair like she's a fourth person. It's just very, very interesting and very confusing, and hopefully we will have some answers as the book goes on, though at this point Tamsyn has not given us many answers at all in her book. We've just been getting question after question after question, and we're just spiraling into confusion at this point in the book, I feel like. Since we've had such a changed past, and we're relearning what her past is that she thinks she had, and now we're learning, how the real past is now intersecting with the present. So definitely very, very interesting. It's very interesting that Harrow's mind is, being dissolved by this. So whatever is going on is so strong that she's not triggering memories, she's just dissolving her brain. And luckily she's just pretty much invincible from that kind of stuff at this point. And then at the end, before they take off, after they've learned that Sextus is still alive in that piece of bone, it's very interesting that Camilla mentions that they were saved from the first house by the blood of Eden, which we have been mentioned to about this one previous time with her conversation in the past with God. In fact, when I read that line, I had to end up going back and looking up a little bit about what God said about them and how they are kind of an extremist group. But it doesn't really understand how this is going to be related. He didn't give us enough detail to truly understand what this group is and what this will mean and how that relates to, God and his efforts and what he's doing. So we'll hopefully continue to learn about that and see what's going on as we continue through the book. But I would really love to hear your opinions about this whole interaction, about why you think Camilla chose this time to randomly show up. Or do you think this is just when she was able to get a hold of Harrow? it's tough to say. And do you think Harrow's past self and Camilla is kind of in cahoots? Or do you think that the blood of Eden is setting this stuff in motion? It would be very, very interesting to hear your thoughts and opinions. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about Sextus now. So Sextus, we have learned, is still alive in that little piece of bone that Camilla has been carrying around. So he is not dead like we previously thought, and this one at least is in a sense a bit more in line with what Harrow has, so it's not completely destroying her mentality in order just to know that Sextus is alive in here. And she truly did not believe that it was possible that he would just go mad, being trapped in this one little piece of bone, not able to have a full body to represent his soul with, and to fill his soul into a moving, living piece of skeleton. I mean, I don't know if it's like the whole skeleton that would be needed in order for it to be considered a full body or not, to keep his spirit stable. But especially this little piece where you can't talk, you can't interact with the world, and you're just tethered to this inanimate object is not supposed to be good enough to be able to hold his spirit to. And he has been holding for a lot longer than he thought he was. He thought it was like a week and a half or whatever. He was like, oh, it hasn't been that long. And it wasn't supposed to be that long when they, obviously came up with this plan and expected Harrow to be able to help him out. However, it's been, like 10 months. And so it's been a lot longer than he expected. And he doesn't totally understand why it's been that long. And it's amazing that he's kept on with only the small little bit of environment that he's had, and had to endure months and months of this small confined area with this one piece of entertainment. I can understand why someone might go mad in the fact that they just really have nothing to interact with. They have nothing to do. They have no one to interact with. It's very lonely. I'm pretty amazed at his own good humor and everything like that. So he's really a champ holding on there. And it's very, very surprising. I like this little addition because, Camilla, we already knew had been alive and that she was missing. So we thought that she could come up, especially with the fact that she had Harrow had a letter for Camilla if she were to ever, meet up with her, that stuff. But we had no clue that Sextus could even possibly be alive. I mean, he was blown to pieces in order to try and stop Cytherea. So this is a really big surprise for me, which is also a pleasant one because I always really liked Sextus from the last book. I was really enjoyed him. I thought he was a good character, a good person, and I was sad to have his story be so as sad as it was, with the fact that the love that he had was gone before he even got a chance to meet her. So definitely enjoying that he's back. Don't know how it's going to, move forward at this point with that. If he will fully get his control back, or how much longer he's going to have to be stuck attached to these bones and not be able to be a full person. Especially since Camilla said it should get her in trouble if Harrow actually made her a full skeleton for him to be a part of. But now at least he's got a full hand, so now he's ingrained in a hand. So I don't know if that means that he's gonna be able to interact with people by moving the fingers around. I don't know if that means he can hear or not. But he at least has something, I suppose. It'll just be interesting to see how that goes from there, and what part he has to play still, since obviously Tamsyn is keeping him alive in order for some kind of role for him to have. So he's been there for months and months with only that book, and then Harrow comes in and he's finally so happy to have somebody to talk to and interact with. Probably has saved his sanity in the fact that he finally had some kind of interaction, something going on, some knowledge of the world. And it's pretty amazing that whole time that she is there, he never once says anything that would, completely destroy her idea of what the past was. He doesn't mention Gideon. He doesn't, mention, the fact that she didn't want to be a lector. Well, I mean, he kind of mentioned that a little bit, like, oh, you were never going to be a lector. And Gideon's like, oh yeah, well, I am now. And then he was sad about it, but he didn't mention Gideon. He didn't ask, like, why that happened. He didn't, have any other inclination of, like, talking to her in a sense that would, like, completely break apart the things that she has set up in her mind to be the new truth. So I found that super, super interesting, because he doesn't know that she doesn't know about Gideon, doesn't know that she changed her memories, that kind of stuff. So I was super surprised that, the whole Gideon thing didn't come out right then and there. Like, I was expecting it, hands down, be like, okay, all bets are off. There was no letter for this. She had no way of knowing that Sextus was even alive still to be meeting him. But he played it cool, and he still didn't judge Harrow, even though he was saddened for her. Didn't judge the fact that she was a lector. Still enjoyed the small interactions that he was able to have with her, until, of course, the sleeper was brought forward into this space because Harrow had visited him there, and somehow that piece of her memory was now invading the space that they were in. Don't know now if Sextus is still alive, but my guess would be that yes, he is, since it seems very weird that they would bring him in and that she would visit him only to have killed him in that moment. Like, it seems like there's something more planned for Sextus. Otherwise, why would he be hanging on so long? And how could he have hung on this long if he wasn't strong enough to withstand whatever she brought? So I feel like once she left, either the sleeper left or he was able to figure out how to expel it or whatever. I truly believe that he will still be alive there. What do you think about this whole Sextus moment where, like, he's attached to this area? It's supposed to be impossible, but he's holding on strong. And do you think that he will make it through to the end? I'd be really interested to know your thoughts and feelings on this particular portion of our chapters. Okay, so last but not least, I'd like to go over the nitty gritty. I actually had quite a few things that I was like, oh, I want to mention this, and I want to mention this, and I want to mention this, and they're all kind of like little bits and pieces. So I kind of condensed them into 4 main things I'd like to talk about, either to just mention, keep in mind, I thought was interesting, or something that I want us to bring forward into the future chapters in order for us to think about and be aware of. So the first thing I had was just a thought, and it was something that was like really stuck out to me after I thought it, so I just wanted to include it to see what you think about it, and I would really love to know what your thoughts and opinions are on after this. But while I was reading, and obviously they have this dinner, which you don't really hear about what they're eating, you just hear about all the drinking and stuff like that, but where do you think they get all their food and water from? They're in the middle of deep space, and yes, there are planets around them. Yes, I understand that, especially because they're killing them, but it doesn't sound like, from the way that Harrow is talking about it, that they're going to these planets and like harvesting the food and then killing it. And they're also considered quote unquote dead planets, even though this particular planet that she had on still had some wildlife and the trees and the foliage and stuff like that. So does that mean that they could harvest food and water from that planet? Or do these other planets have that same foliage and water and food and stuff like that? Like, they're in deep space. They've been in deep space for months now. Where is the food coming from? That's something that I've just been thinking about, especially because it's such a limited setting. The setting is mostly deep space and their spacecraft. So it's such a narrow setting that we have going on right now. I mean, the first house was also a limited setting, but it had a little bit more depth to it. It had a little bit more of like, okay, they are on a planet, they can, survive. They, obviously have things that they can go and bring in food and stuff like that. It's not where you're out in the middle of space where food doesn't grow, unless they have something that grows on the ship. We have no talking about that. We don't mention it at all. So I just was like, where does the food come from? How is there just always food, especially enough for all these fancy dinners and for Harrow to make soup 20 times and fail? So I just find it very interesting that there's no real mention of like supplies or anything like that they have to do. They don't stop off at any stations. It seems like they're in the middle of nowhere space where like nobody goes. So just very, very interesting, and makes me wonder exactly how they are getting their nutrients and stuff. Maybe that doesn't bother you, maybe you don't care, but to me, I just had this thought, like, where is all the food coming from? And just felt like I wanted to share that thought with you guys, and to hear your opinion if you have one. Next, I think that it's very interesting that God and the Lyctors see these planets that don't have life on them as dead planets, even though that there are trees, there's foliage, there's animals, and that they're just so willing to kill them. Now, I understand that this big monster or big enemy that's coming towards them will eat the planets and become stronger that way. I get that. So I get that they're trying to kill the planets to weaken whatever is coming. But how is it so easy to just go up and kill this whole planet that has all these animals and creatures on it? It just seems like you wouldn't consider that as a dead planet. Especially since Camilla and everybody else was on that planet. It obviously is habitable for life. It just doesn't have any life on it right now. So I'm curious as to how they are considered dead. What is the definition for them as a dead planet that is allowed to be killed? And, you know, how it just seems like this whole book kind of, and this is just kind of putting the topping on the cake, just has no real care about whether somebody or something dies or lives. It's very much a don't really give a crap about life, and that death is just pass it around. Maybe because, you know, they're so... Sorry guys, there are some kids playing outside my apartment, so if you can hear them, I am apologizing right now for it. But anyway, because there is just so much death and destruction and like, you know, just mutilating each other and then fixing each other up, is that, do they really see death so easily that and they just don't care about it? Maybe they're that old, they're just like, that death is just whatever at this point. But it is a little sad and a little interesting that they can see this as a dead planet, even though there are a lot of animals and plants and things, and it has an environment that could have people living on it. Next is a very important one that I think we should keep in mind, is that we end chapter 33 with the fact that, sorry, let me grab my book here because I want to go back to that section, but it ends with seeing me. So it's finally, we're seeing a little bit of an indication that there is a first person narrator for our second person point of view, which makes sense. So the ending, here we go, I got it. So the ending little bit says, but you were always too quick to mourn your own ignorance. You never could have guessed that he had seen me. So, what exactly does the seen me mean? Who is our narrator? It's super interesting. And I know I mentioned all the way back on our first class discussing this book that one of my theories about the second person point of view was that Gideon was the one still telling this story, that Gideon was the first person point of view for the first book, and that maybe our second person point of view was Gideon telling Harrow her own story, and that was why it was second person point of view, was because Gideon's telling Harrow, you did this, you did that. And this moment where it says that he had seen me makes me think that, again, that kind of like revitalized my idea that, well, maybe this is Gideon, and she's still the first person point of view, but she's telling the first person narrator, and she's telling us in a second person point of view the story, because it's like she's telling Harrow the story going on right now. Obviously, I can't know that for sure. Obviously, we'll see if that's really the case or not, but that was just my little kind of thought in the process in the beginning, and now I've got with just the one little bit at the end here of that chapter, it makes me think, oh, maybe that is right. Maybe because we do see for a second that first person narrator speaking about themselves. So very, very interesting. and I'd be really interested to find out exactly what or who our narrator actually is and why it is in second person. Okay, last but not least, I just wanted to point out the fact that the story has finally become smoother. We are finally getting a line of events that are, in a row that is much easier to follow than we have in the previous sets of the story. We don't have all the jumping around between this time and the past, and just little bits and pieces of oh, we're here, and then we're over here, and then we're over here, and this is what Harrow thinks about here and here. So now we're finally getting into a more linear timeline, which has really been, for me, enhancing the story, because we're now finally getting somewhere where we can follow along, and we're finally moving, I feel like, forward with the plot and where we're going. So we'll see how long that lasts. We'll see where this plot takes us. But I just think it's kind of nice that we finally had a little bit of chunk of story that is okay, we're following a pattern, we're following this line of history that is being unfolded before us, and it's giving it a little bit easier to understand, a little bit easier to kind of connect certain things together and to look at the picture. So definitely an interesting set of chapters, and I'm excited to move on with the next set. Before we go ahead and wrap all of this up, let's go ahead and go over the trivia question as always. Thank you very, very much to everybody who participated. I actually had quite a few entries this time, so thank you so much to everybody who added their names in and gave it their best guess. If you would like to find the trivia question yourself, you are welcome to go over to fantasyfictionfanatics.net, which is the blog, and it'll be on the right-hand side. If you're on desktop, you'll scroll down just a little bit, and it will be on that right-hand side. If you're on mobile, you'll have to scroll almost all the way down, but you will find the question down there. Last week's answer was brownies. I gave a list of a couple different answers or creatures and said which one is the smallest in size, and the brownies is correct. Congratulations to Kathy, Paul, Dave, Brendan, and Christian. These herbal brownies are groovy, man. Of course, thank you to Christian, who always has the most unique and interesting sidelines on his name. I always appreciate seeing them. But congratulations to all of you who got it correct. For those of you who did not, nice try. I really appreciated you answering and giving it your best shot. I'm sure you will get the next one. If while you're over there checking out the trivia question, you want to see more content from me, you're welcome to see what other posts I have on there. I've got book reviews, book recommendations, discussions on fantasy or book topics. I've got a couple personal ones from me, lots of different things like that, and you're welcome to go ahead and check those out, and hopefully you enjoy it. You're always welcome to let me know about either the channel or the blog type of content you would like to see. I'd be happy to accommodate you and make those videos or those posts. Okay, if you would like to contact me, and down below is not the best place for you, you are welcome to contact me through Facebook at fantasyfiction1, as well as on Twitter, which is also at fantasyfiction1. I'd be happy to hear from you there, or you're welcome to get all updates from me there. I do post all my stuff once it is up over there, as well as any updates for the Fantasy Fiction Fanatics channel. I always put things up there, whether I'm not able to film for whatever reason, or just fun little things I go ahead and post there for you to see on either social media. I think that is it for me today. Oh, this last shout out is for the Discord. If you'd like to join your fellow fantasy fanatics and to talk to all of us, including me, you can reach me there, as well as over 40 people who are over there chatting and having a good time talking about fantasy. Go ahead and click on the link down below. You are welcome to join us, and we would be happy to have you. So, all right, I guess I will see you guys in the next class, and I'll talk to you then. Bye.